So this is that scenario where we're going to be watching as Henri pushes on through. The outer bands are going to continue to produce these pop-up storms that really will provide just a brief heavy downpour, but also that spin up. And a lot of times it's not something you can really see because it's just the rain coming down so hard. You're going to actually see it's going to be rain wrapped, which means the clouds will be lowering and you may not notice it. So you want to make sure that if you're under the tornado warning, you just want to head indoors and stay safe out there. But again, Eric, I'm looking at some of the information. I'm not really seeing any reports of anything currently at this moment. No warnings from any of the residents around that area. But of course, this pop-up storm could produce some spin up, and that's why the National Weather Service has issued this tornado warning until 2:15. But I'm going to keep monitoring, of course, Twitter and the National Weather Service for any new information on these storms. We're just going to have to continue to watch it. Okay.
So as always, when there's a tornado warning in our area, we'll always be with you to bring you the latest information, because even if they're brief, they can cause a pretty significant risk to property and life. We want to make sure that everyone has that updated information. There's the latest scan on the radar, and kind of talking about the use of radar in this situation. It better almost add the people on the ground who are really telling us the story, because there's not a lot that really sticks out glaring. There's not a big strong wind field today, so anything that would pop up would likely be short-lived, a very brief scale, and it's not going to show up like, say, a stronger system that we've had, like the Cape Cod tornadoes, a Springfield tornado. It's not going to look like that on radar today. It's a different type of setup when you have a tropical system. But we've seen enough rotation, and more importantly, we've seen that ground report of a funnel cloud in West Acton a short while ago, and now this is right just north of 202 and heading into air from the Littleton area. So there's still that warning. This moving to the north and west. I think especially if you drew a line right through here, if you're on this northwestern side of this cone, that's probably the most likely spot that we might see a spin up. If you're in that path, you want to make sure you're in the lowest level of the house and just waiting for that storm to move on by. In air in the next few minutes and into Groton at 153, and then the west side of Groton around 159 this evening. So if you are making your way through town here, it's a good time to just get off the roadways, wait for that cell to pass. It's going to be unique. Some of these bigger severe weather days that we have, the skies get really dark. You see a big line of billowing clouds. You get a lot of lightning. You get a lot of hail. And you get more wind, you get more outflow from these storms. These aren't going to be like that. Basically, you be in the sunshine and calm weather, and then you get into this downpour, pours rain, and there's a quick spin of tornado, and that's it. So every situation is a little bit different, and this is certainly a tropical type of situation that we don't get very often, because we don't often have a lot of tropical storms or depressions that are spinning across New England. But we did last week with Fred. We all remember that one where we had a tornado in Clinton. We also had one in Thompson, Connecticut, and we had some warnings in Lynn and on the North Shore. This is basically the same kind of setup here. When you've got those leftover remnants, you've got a little extra twist and spin in the atmosphere, especially out ahead of the center of these, and you've certainly got the tropical air mass, and that's important too. Something that makes tornadoes a little bit more likely is when those cloud bases are low and you've got really juicy air, and we can feel it outside today. It's certainly plenty hot and humid enough outdoors, and so each one of these could produce these brief spin-ups. There's a look at the dew points. There's your fuel. Upper 60s to low 70s outside. When you add a little extra wind energy to the atmosphere and a little instability, you can see where the sun's out. Norwood's up to 84, 83 in Taunton. This corridor will be next, by the way, in that 495 belt. As the action moves a little east, a couple downpours develop. We've got more instability here. That's where we'd expect maybe the risk to kind of translate to as we make our way more toward 3 and 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock later on this evening. The big picture, things will cool down a little bit once the rain starts to push on in. It's entering central Massachusetts right now. This is the rest of the remnants of Henri, and as that moves in, it starts to bring down some of that instability. It's meager as it is right now. It's just enough to get some of these rotating storms, but as it rains more into it, we'll start to see that risk decrease from west to east across the area. That shield of rain is just about into Worcester. It's now making its way into Barre, and it's just crawling off toward the east. It's these little pop-ups out ahead of it that carry the biggest risk for a tornado. So if you're just joining us now, if you've just joined the stream, or if you're with us on WBZ, we've got a couple of these cells out ahead of the main line that's rolling in from Henri and its remnants. Each one of these has the potential to spin this afternoon. A tornado warning is issued until 2:15 for this cell that's now moving into air. And as that moves north and west, we'll see if it can hold together or if it weakens at all. But there was a sighted funnel cloud with it in West Acton. And so that was the immediate reason the Weather Service put this warning on. Really important on a day day like today, if anyone sees something, some of those funnel cloud activity, we've received videos from what we saw earlier on today in Marlborough as well as Hudson. That really helps to tell the story because these are very far from the radar. And a lot of the warnings today have actually come from spotters saying, hey, we're seeing some rotation, we're seeing funnel clouds. The radar presentation is not impressive enough to really give a good hint. These are the types of storms that would never get warned back in the day. Before there was a dual pole radar or we had all these cell phones and coverage, these are little things that would likely have been missed and they wouldn't have had warnings back in the past. You wouldn't have good enough resolution on radar, good enough coverage to even know something was happening. So what you're telling us is a big help out there this afternoon. So again, this cell right here, moving toward Air and Groton, still has the warning on it. If you're now south and east of Littleton, you're in the clear as that system has passed. So good news for that side of things as it moves slowly off to the north and west, about 20 miles per hour here. And we've got our heavier rainfall to go along with it. If you're in Shirley, you're also watching the storm. It looks like it might just skirt to the north of you, but you want to be extra careful if you're in this warning here and just staying in a safe spot off the roads and lowest level of the house until things move on by. So again, the updated timing hasn't changed all that much. 1:54 in Groton. If you're in the Townsend area, well, you're into downpour number 1, but this next one that has the warning on it would be arriving around 2:17 this afternoon. So kind of at the tail end of the warning here, which is in effect until 2:15 for this one. And then if you're farther to the east, you're still watching the skies because the same thing may happen here inside 495 later on this afternoon and into the early evening hours. So there's a window here that'd be most likely to see any tornadic activity. It's been a busy 4 or 5 days. Everyone's probably a little sick of the weather around here since early last week where we had Fred's flooding, we had those tornadoes, we had the Henri buildup, we had some of the rain, some of the wind surge with that. And now today we've got this risk of tornadoes and flash flooding. After today, things do quiet down. So bear with us today, stay safe, get through the weather today, and we'll be in better shape as we head toward the midweek. And WBZ's Paula Eben is on the desk again this afternoon. Paula, what are you hearing? Yeah,
this is getting to be a regular occasion here for us, Eric. But
Yes.
now as you're watching, I know you had mentioned that there would be this boomerang effect of Henri kind of swinging back through with these rains that we see behind you right now on the screen. But is the hope that as that really rainy section moves in, that will kind of dissipate these chances for these spin-up tornado warnings?
It should. There still would be a small risk, but overall, we're really looking out ahead of it because as the rain falls through the air, you start to get a little more stability. You lose some of that buoyancy, the air that wants to rise. And so overall, it should start to diminish the tornado risk as we head deeper into the afternoon. And that heavier rainfall, it's been coming down across western Mass and into Connecticut, and now it's entering Worcester, where we're making a run at our wettest summer on record. It'll be climbing up the charts today with more additional rainfall. But it's in the sunshine that's farther to the east where we get a bit more instability. We've got a better chance for just a little stronger updraft, and that's all it takes to get things moving and spinning. And so that's really the story of the day here. Out ahead of this main line of rain, we've got that tornado risk, and then in the rainfall, we've got a chance for some flash flooding, particularly on the roadways. So here's a look at the radar, and we had the rain look, but this is wind. So we're looking at velocity here. That's basically looking at wind speeds. If you think about where the radar is, if we're in this side of Massachusetts, we're using the Taunton radar, and Taunton is looking at the wind speeds here. The reds are moving away from the radar, so that is Doppler shift. If you remember back from science class back in middle school or high school, things moving away, well, it's red. And if it's moving toward you, you get the green shadings. There's a little subtle green showing up. So basically, this wind is heading away from the radar through Littleton. This wind is coming toward the radar down through the Harvard area. And so where they come together is where you have that little tiny spot of rotation. If you've been with us for some other previous tornado warnings, you know that this doesn't look overly impressive. And to be sure, the type of systems we'll be thinking about today are the very weak, brief tornadoes. The EF0s, winds 60 to 85 miles per hour, things like that would be the most likely candidates. But they still can bring down some trees, cause power outages, and certainly you don't want to be hit by a tornado, even if it's only 60 miles per hour. So these weaker ones do have an impact for us, no doubt about that. And it is showing up subtly on radar. That's why the ground truth is so important. When people are sending in those reports, I'm not sure that this even would have gotten a warning without someone saying, hey, I'm seeing rotation, I see a funnel cloud, because the radar is so subtle at this point when we look at some of those winds. And all this will continue spinning off to the east today. It's a day where everyone's one's getting something different. It's the steady rainfall to the west. It's that tornado risk just out ahead of it. And if you're down toward Cape Cod and the islands, you're in the sunshine. You're probably enjoying a beach day. And you could go outside for the next few hours and not deal with any significant weather until this rain rolls in much later tonight. So we're going to be focusing more toward Metro West 495 belt as we head towards, say, the 3 and 4 o'clock hours, then more toward the coastline as we head toward the 5, 6 o'clock hours for any risk of any of these rotating storms. But it's starting to go down, that risk of severe weather here from Worcester west. It'll be more focused on the rainfall and some of that flooding on the roadways. But until this warning's dropped, we will be staying with you to make sure you're staying updated, and anyone in the path of this particular cell has the latest information if you're just joining us. The warning's until 2:15. We've got these 2 little downpours that do not look like much, but we have seen rotation. We've had reported funnel clouds. This one over air as we speak. Groton, you're going to be next with this. And then one cell here that's just crossing the border in New Hampshire. This one is not currently rotating enough to warrant a warning on it. But again, the same idea. Any of these individual downpours are going to want to spin on a day like today. So we have to watch each one of them very carefully. I know sometimes it gets monotonous in a tornado warning because you're waiting to see if something's on the ground. If it happens, each scan's a little different. They kind of go back and forth in intensity. The winds change a little bit with each couple of minutes as well. So that's why we stay with it in case anything really starts to move up or in case that warning's dropped, and then we can kind of wave the all clear flag on any of these. So this warning slice remains. If you're now south and east of where you see that heavier rain showing up, you're now in the clear from that particular storm. Same story out to the western side of this polygon, and I'd say even into that northeastern corner of it. You'll be talking about not really in the path of this particular storm. Something else we talk about more now because things have changed in terms of trying to nail down the accuracy on these. Watches warnings, they used to be really county-based, and they're not anymore. So you might get that alert on your phone, and you say, oh, it's in 3 counties, or it's in 2 counties, it's in Middlesex, it's in Worcester County. Well, these polygons are really much smaller areas. They try to focus on the exact point of rotation and where that's going to head. So if you got that warning and you're tuning in and you're in, say, southern Middlesex County or southern Worcester County, this doesn't include you. It's really just this spot here that we're keeping a close eye on with that one particular downpour. I want to check back in with Sarah Robleski, who's been watching some of the Twitter reports, getting anything from the Weather Service or any more additional things besides that funnel cloud we saw in West Acton earlier?
You know, we did not see any confirmation of a tornado from this one or any update from the National Weather Service. Of course, they just continue to keep the tornado warning in place just because with these localized storms, they can create these brief spin-ups. So you could see the funnel cloud come down and go right back up. So they just don't want to take away that hazard just yet. This is just one of those situations throughout the day where we've seen these cells that don't look that great on radar, or they just start to pulse up and they could briefly spawn funnel cloud or tornado in spots, which we did have reports of a tornado near Marlborough earlier today, just after the lunch hour. And we did get reports and video of funnel clouds as well as tornadoes. But we're going to continue to monitor the situation here. And it still looks as though we have a tornado warning for this area. But, you know, Eric, looking at some of the latest information, I have not received any update from the National Weather Service that they are going to discontinue this just for the fact that these storms can pulse. But it's very interesting to see that, you know, there's no lightning associated with these. It is just really these brief tornado risk that we're going to be watching for as we go through the afternoon before, you know, most of the steadier rain from Henri continues to push eastward.
Okay, I did see when you were talking there that they shaved it back. So they cut off that side, the edges that we were just talking about. So they're keeping it in place. But for the spots that are no longer in, we're talking about kind of trying to nail down the accuracy so people who are not in the warning don't need to be worried and they know that they're not included. So that's good news for some of those spots like Littleton and Westford. But we still have the warning right for that cell over Ayr and Groton. And that is continuing to move off to the north-northwest at about 20 miles per hour. The warning remains until 2:15 this afternoon. This is a situation where no news is good news. As Sarah was saying, we haven't heard any more ground reports of something that has touched down. And that's the end game of all of this. If they need to go out and do any surveys, tornado damage is what would initiate any survey. But we have seen at least a funnel cloud with this one, and now heading into Groton. So if you're in that, say, Gibbet Hill kind of area, that's where we'd be watching this storm, and that's where you'd want to be staying in a very safe spot until things move on by. Ayr as well, you're in that, and then we'll see if it holds together as it heads over toward Townsend and Pepperell as it continues to push off to the north and west. Again, you look at this, and it's just, it does not look like your classic thing. But if I could share kind of a personal story, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. You know, I haven't gone tornado chasing racing. But the only tornado I've seen in person is one like this. It's one that was in a tropical system where we're reporting on it, and it just rolled on in, and you wouldn't have even known. Basically, you were standing in rain, you were standing on a cloudy day, and then all of a sudden a squirrel went by and it wrecked a house. So basically, that's the kind of setup that we would have out there today. You're looking at something that quickly could spin, quickly could damage a home or a car, vehicle, could knock down some trees, and we just want to make sure we stay on top of it until they move on by, because even the smaller ones, the weaker ones, the more subtle types of systems can have an impact on someone's life. So you just want to make sure you take it seriously. But that warning's still on until 2:15 for our cell that's crossing Route 111. We haven't had any confirmed reports of a touchdown. We did have a confirmed report of a funnel, and then we did have a confirmed report of a touchdown for a different cell. That was back in Marlboro earlier on today. So it's been a busy day in central Massachusetts, no doubt about that. So Route 111 and also heading over toward 225. This is where the storm is headed next as it travels off to the north and west here. We still have that radar indicated some rotation. It's not going to be glaring. If you're a weather enthusiast, someone who checks things out on radar, if you follow along with these storms, you probably look at it and say, but I can barely see where that rotation is. It's just something that is going to be really, really subtle and quick. This is the way a lot of the tropical systems tend to go when they come to these spin-ups. Does look like things are kind of pulsing down a little bit with that Townsend cell, and I think as this does pull to the north and west and closer into that rain shield that's moving in, we'll probably see the same, but for now there's still a risk on this one. And so the timing on it, again, West Groton at 2:03, Townsend area around 2:20 this afternoon. Paula?
Terry points out, Eric, which is good news, that the only real hazard for a spin-up tornado today, as we look at any of these warnings, is the tornado, low risk of anything else like hail, lightning, or straight-line winds with the storm.
Yes, it's a good point. You know, it's not the type of day where the cold front's bearing down out of the northwest, and here comes the line. The sky is getting real dark, and you hear all the thunder, and you see the lightning flashing, and there's hail. There's no element of that when we have a storm system like this. When you've got these tropical remnants, it all comes down to the fact that it's real warm, it's real humid, and you've got a little extra spin in the atmosphere because you basically got a bowling ball, low pressure, that's just coming through western Connecticut and western Massachusetts. So you can see how things are just rotating around. You can get an idea for those winds as they veer around the storm system. You add a little bit of instability. So those are our two main ingredients when we're looking at tornadoes. It's instability and it's wind shear. The storm system itself provides that wind shear as the winds rip around it counterclockwise. The instability is coming from those bursts of sunshine we've had today. And as things heat up, now air wants to rise. The air starts rising, and then the shear starts to spin the rising air, and then you can get these brief spin-up tornadoes. You can see how the temperatures spiked into the 80s where the sun's out. That's where we have the instability. And then as things start to move in from the west, we'll start to lose some of that as it rains more. A dew point of 70 in Fitchburg, dew point of 70 in Boston, it's been a real tropical air mass. And when the clouds are low, it's also a little bit easier to get a tornado to form. But you look toward Springfield at 75, Keene at 75, Worcester's starting to cool now. That's where you're going to start to lose your instability, and you're going to start to lose that tornado risk a little bit as the steadier rainfall pushes on in, and it puts a wet blanket basically down across the instability in the area. And that steadier rain is now across all of western Worcester County and just starting to push over toward that 395 corridor down through Worcester and then heading over into, say, the Sutton area and then eventually over toward Metro West. Our main tornado spin-up risk today will be in the sunshine to the east. So we still may see a couple more of these cells kind of flare up around the 495 to 128 belt later on this afternoon, and that's where we'd be tracking for the rest of the day. Otherwise, I mean, you look at that radar, and it just doesn't scream tornado risk. The only reason I think this really even got a warning is because someone saw a funnel cloud with it, and we've seen a lot of those reports, and we appreciate everything that people have been sending our way today. It really helps to tell the story with all these individual cells that, again, subtlety is the name of the game today with all of them. Sarah, have we gotten any other word from anyone with this? No news is good news. I'd like to hear the answer be no.
I haven't seen any reports of any spotted funnel clouds or tornadoes. But, you know, one thing, Eric, as I was tracking the earlier warnings later for the morning and midday, and we did have a confirmed tornado, interesting enough to see that this particular cell, as it moved northward, it sort of pulsed, it rained itself out, and then we saw it redevelop. As you were mentioning, just the atmosphere is really primed for this, as we've got the warm conditions, that little bit of sunshine and the dew points. So these pop-up showers hours ahead of the main steadier rain out to our west is what we're going to be watching closely. And it doesn't look all that impressive on radar, but it's still the folks out there who are spotting it, and it doesn't take much and a lot of time. I mean, these brief tornadoes and spin-ups can happen in a matter of seconds, and all it does is need to touch a tree and create some pockets of damage and debris, and you've got some problems out there. So it's just one of those good days to keep an eye on the sky, and if you see any sort of lowering of clouds or perhaps some rotation, you want to make sure you head indoors and get shelter. You want to head to the lowest part of your house, a basement, interior location, away from any windows, because again, debris is going to be one of the main hazards. But we have not really had much reports from these spin-outs. In fact, we just saw there was a tree that did go down on a couple of cars in Marlboro, where we did have that report of a tornado pushing northward right after the lunch hour. But after that, just spots of ominous clouds out there, and we will see ominous clouds through the afternoon. So it's just one of those days to just keep an eye and be weather alert and be prepared for changing conditions.
All right, Paula, do you have a report or a question here?
Curious, Eric, as we begin to get closer to 2:15, and the hope is that this warning will be dropped, all those clouds behind you with the bands of Henri moving toward the east. How much rain are we talking about?
We're probably going to be looking at something on the order of a ½ inch to 2 inches of rainfall in some spots today as these downpours make their way back on in. So it doesn't look like it's going to be as heavy or intense as what we had with Fred last week, where some towns got 5 inches of rainfall, but still there'd be some flash flooding on the roadways. The ground is just soaked. I mean, really, the summer. It's just been pouring nonstop. So more rainfall, some more standing water, some more flooded out roadways are going to be possible this afternoon. I would say especially in central Massachusetts, just because that has been the wettest part of the area really here recently. It got the brunt of some of the heaviest rainfall that we got with Fred's remnants last week. And so there's a look at the current flood watches out across central Massachusetts into southern New Hampshire and also into Rhode Island. We've had flash flood warnings into Connecticut around the Hartford area, as well as into Tolland County today. Looks like we saw our eyes over Groton, Mass. Weak rotation, history of funnel clouds. Okay, so basically no big change from the Weather Service. Just got a little update from them as to what they've been watching and seeing. I will say that the last couple of scans really have fallen apart on this cell that's over Groton. That's great news. We would love to see that continue, but there have been just reports of seeing some of these funnel clouds, the spin-ups, and that's why they want to stay with the warning. Abundance of caution, really the name of the game with all of these. That's kind of where we're leaning toward with all these little cells out ahead of it. And again, the same story in New Ipswich. There's a little bit of subtle rotation here. There's no warning on it, but it's the same type of cell out ahead of the main line of rainfall. And then as the rain moves in, things cool. We'll turn our attention more to the road flooding instead of the tornado risk. And so it's just another busy weather day, but I can at least tell you this is the last really busy weather day for at least a couple. We'll get a break here on Tuesday and Wednesday before storms return on Thursday here later on this week. So there's the radar. If you're just joining us, they have that warning out still up until 2:15. We'll stay with you until the warning is dropped. And as soon as that happens, we'll send you back to some regular programming. We've got the heavier rainfall in Gardner, Winchendon, Fitzwilliam, and then all across western Worcester County. It's been pouring into Connecticut today. I actually saw one of the rivers around Hartford had its 4th highest crest on record, just behind a hurricane of 38 by about 1.5 feet. And so it tells you how much rain and how wet it has been over the course of this summer and over the last few weeks as well. We do still have the warning. You see the last couple of scans, I mean, really falling apart here. So I think we're probably going to be in good shape with this cell. It's down to a rain shower at this point into Groton and Pepperell. We did have the rotation earlier. We had the reports, but I do expect we're probably going to see this warning dropped in a few minutes, if not, if they keep it up until the full warning, up until 2:15. There's a look at the velocity side of things. Nothing that's really glaring with this. I mean, it's not really showing up particularly well on the wind side of all the action. We still just have the warning in that shower that's basically starting to rain itself out here in the Groton area. It's been moving in from the south and east, but very quickly over the last few scans, we've seen what we want to see. We've seen it really starting to lose some of that oomph and some of that instability as the clouds roll in and the rain rolls in from the west. That's going to be really what we focus on this afternoon. As soon as the rain starts to come in, we lose enough of that juice to really produce any spinning cells. But we do appreciate all the reports you've been sending in today. Got a lot of pictures, video from what we saw around Marlboro, the Hudson area, very close to Clinton, which was hit by that tornado last week on Thursday. So it's been a busy stretch of weather, no question about that. If you're thinking about what's ahead, if you're in, say, Metro West or over toward Boston, we'll be watching more toward the 3, 4, 5 o'clock hours for a chance. It's all about the little cells that pop out ahead of the main line of rainfall. And if we could animate this a little bit and put it into motion, I think you can even see some of the wind shear that's out there and how things will change a little. See how this rain is mostly moving from south to north, and then these cells have been moving from southeast to northwest, kind of getting sucked in. And when you start to move the wind across, change the direction, that's where you start to see enough of that vorticity or twist in the atmosphere to really get things moving. But we still have the warning up. We'll stay with it until they drop it. I have seen a lot of improvement, so that's great news for all of you in Air and Groton if you're watching this storm. And if you're worried, it's always a good place to stay in your lowest level of the house until these types of storms pass. And then we can get back to hopefully the rest of your afternoon with some just regular rainfall making its way on in. Until that occurs, though, we'll be staying with you with this particular warning. But the good news is, haven't had any more updates from the Weather Service or from anyone on the ground for an actual touchdown with this. It's just been funnel clouds up to this point. Hopefully that remains the case for the rest of this afternoon. And after we get through today's rain, we can turn our attention to hopefully a couple days and a chance to dry out, a little more sunshine, a little less action in the weather department. The other interesting thing today, although we might see a couple of these warnings, there's really not a whole lot of wind out there. Outside the storms, it's not going to be like a big squall line rolling in where the wind picks up and the downdrafts come in. Not that kind of scenario here. So you'll basically be like a summer day with nothing happening, and then a cell comes in with this tornado warning, and we'll see if any more of them actually touch down throughout the course of the afternoon. Some of the elements of heavier rainfall pushing into southern Worcester County right now, and we'll watch that cell in New Ipswich, New Hampshire. Nothing else has popped yet here around the Boston area, but it is very warm and very unstable, so there may be a couple more yet to come. If you're in the Southbridge, Uxbridge area, and then heading back toward, say, Palmer, Ludlow, getting some very heavy rainfall, this is where we'll see likely some street flooding developing. And in Worcester, because it's more urban, more concrete, very likely to be at least some flash flooding occurring this afternoon as the steadier rain starts to roll back on into town, into your area. It's just easier to flood things out. Big picture with Henri's remnants. You take a look at the visible satellite picture. There's what's left over. Everything's spinning here. You've got that one core of cloud cover. You've got some bands that are pushing on through off to the northwest side. And then if you're down towards, say, the South Shore, the Cape, and the islands, you're in good shape for a couple more hours at least, just in the pure sun. So everyone's getting something completely and utterly different out there this afternoon. Socked into rain and clouds across the interior. The sun's been trying to pull out in Boston, although there's fog that's also made its way into the city. And then if you're down in southeastern Massachusetts, it's baking. Basically feels like Tampa outside, well into the 80s and extremely humid. So that warning is still up for a couple more minutes yet, 5 more minutes. Looks like they're going to let it run until the full expiration here, until 2:15. If I'm a little exasperated, it's because I've been watching the radar. It's falling apart, basically, here, Paula. And
this is really losing steam at this point, Eric. And we're hanging on until 2:15 because it's a better safe than sorry situation based on what we've already seen around noontime.
Exactly, exactly. Because we have had these reports of funnel clouds. We know there's rotation out there. We know that there have been some tornadic activity with these cells. And so it looks like they'll keep it going until 2:15. We always stay with you when there's a tornado warning in our area, just to make sure that everyone's covered and everyone's staying safe out there. But if we zoom back in on this cell where that warning is, basically, you look at what's left with this particular one that had the warning on it, and it's a shower. So as it makes its way north and west, we'll see if it pulses anymore. But more looking at this one in New Ipswich, this one does not have a warning, but it's a similar type of cell and did just get the word that it's dropped. So the tornado warning is expired now. We're in good shape here. This one has weakened. We are going to be tracking, though, the rain as we make our way into the afternoon, that chance for some flash flooding. But the Weather Service says that they are going to expire this tornado warning as they no longer see any of that rotation or anything overly serious with this one. But it may still be a busy afternoon. We'll keep an eye on any more that do pop out across much of eastern Massachusetts over the next few hours. And some of that warmer weather, we've got a little more instability around that 495 corridor and up to around Boston. And we'll track some of the heavier rainfall that's actually going to be rolling its way on in from the west. And although this is still showing up, basically sometimes they send us a message saying we're going to let it expire. So it still may be in effect for 3 more minutes technically, but they are going to let it, they're not going to extend it, I guess is the other way of putting it. It will not extend any further. And so, Paula, I think we're in okay shape for now. But as we make our way deeper into the day, we'll see if anything else pops.
Yeah, good idea to stay on the air and just let people know as these funnel clouds have been popping up. And we do want to remind you that you can get an alert anywhere, anytime by downloading the WBZ app, and you can get alerts to your tablet, your computer, your cell phone, so you can download that now. And as it says, search CBS Boston to get our WBZ app. And we'd also love to see any video or photos that you might have captured one of these funnel clouds today. You can always email it to us or just tag us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We'll send you back to regular programming now. Thanks so much for staying with us.
WBZ Storm Watch Weather Alert is brought to you by Safety Insurance.